There are 12 pairs of cranial nerves. All of them leave the brainstem except for the olfactory nerve and the optic nerve. Those are the cranial nerves 1 and 2. There are 3 types of cranial nerves. Sensory nerves that relay input information, meaning the messages they relay are coming from the body and towards the brain. Examples of sensory input are things you can smell, taste, sensations like feelings, or things that you can see visually. The other type of cranial nerve are motor nerves. They relay output information. In other words, they take a message from the brain and relay it to the body. Examples of these are movement. Whenever we see the word motor, this is pertaining to movement. So chewing, moving the mouth for speech, including moving the tongue and moving the neck. So we have sensory nerves that relay input information into the brain, and then we have motor nerves that relay output information out of the brain. The third type of cranial nerve are mixed nerves. This is a nerve that has the ability to relay sensory and motor information, hence the word mixed. So let's go over each nerve now. Okay, so starting off with the olfactory nerve. Olfactory carries smell impulses from the nose to the brain. So olfactory nerve is used for smell. It is a sensory nerve because remember, smelling is sensation. Next is oculomotor nerve, trochlear nerve, and the abducens nerve. Now this is very unconventional, but I figure it might save you some time. The job of all 3 of these nerves is primarily to move the eye. Therefore, they're motor nerves. And remember, motor equals movement. So notice that all 3 nerves are right next to each other. This might help you to remember to group them. Also, I just want to point out that primarily, when I say primarily, it means that the nerve also has other jobs, but the most important is the primary movement. So for example, these 3 might have other jobs, but the most important to remember is that they all move the eye. Next is the vestibulocochlear nerve. This receives sensory input from the ears to the brain. So it focuses on hearing and balance, which is equilibrium. Next, hypoglossal nerve. This controls the tongue muscle. And since it controls the tongue muscle and its movement, it's a motor nerve. Next is the accessory nerve. It controls the muscles in the neck, the trapezius, the sternocleidomastoid muscle, and the larynx. Because it controls movement of muscle, it is a motor nerve. Next is the optic nerve. It carries visual impulses from the eyes to the brain, so it helps us with vision. Because it helps with vision, it is a sensory nerve. Next is the trigeminal nerve. It receives facial sensations like pain, temperature, and touch. It also moves the muscles for chewing. Given this information, what kind of nerve would you say this is? A sensory nerve, a motor nerve, or a mixed nerve? Mixed, correct. Sensory for facial sensations and motor for chewing. Next, we have the facial nerve. This assists in facial expression and taste. Given this information, what kind of nerve do you think this is? Mixed. Yes, it is a motor for facial expression because the nerve must target the muscle to move to create facial movement and expression. And it is sensory for taste. So you see how you don't need to memorize if these nerves are sensory, motor, or mixed. You don't need to memorize it because with enough practice, you'll be able to understand and be able to recognize what kind of nerves they are given their function. That's what we're practicing right now. So let me rephrase that. It's not that you shouldn't know or it's not important to know what kind of nerves these are, whether they're sensory, motor, or mixed, but it's that I wouldn't recommend trying to memorize that, because if you memorize their function, you're going to be able to use critical thinking and figure out what type of nerve they are. Okay, so next we have glossopharyngeal. It controls part of the tongue muscle and throat muscle and taste. So what kind of nerve would you say this is? Mixed. Awesome. Motor for movement of the tongue and throat muscles and sensory for taste. Lastly, we have the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve controls muscles in the thoracic and abdominal cavities And what do you find in these cavities? The heart, the lung, and the stomach. So it controls heart rate, respiratory rate, and secretions of some digestive juices. This is a motor nerve because it targets muscles to move the heart, it targets muscles to move the lungs, and it targets muscles to squeeze the glands that hold the digestive juices or the gastric juices. I would say that the vagus nerve is the most important cranial nerve to remember because it controls heart rate and resp rate, which affect your entire body. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with a few flashcards that I made so you can use them to memorize the cranial nerves. I think this is the best way to learn. And thank you so much for being here. Until next time.